Tell me everything. Hey.
I'm just going to listen, and I just want to...
Hey, man. What happened?
What happened? Yeah.
Okay. So you know, just kind of like... I'll follow you.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So.
Oh,
Man.
gosh.
Oh, I have not cried like that in a while, man. And
Jeez.
that's the story. I mean, I know we just met, but I feel like...
I mean, you got... Like, I don't normally share stuff like that with people.
I don't either.
Wow.
And it just felt very natural to bare my soul and hold hands for a few minutes. Not awkwardly, but
Yeah.
you know, in a very manly sort of way.
Well, I think you made me feel safe to kind of open up about... I'll start again.
Oh, man, I'm glad we're not filming it because I definitely never cry
Yeah.
on this show in the middle of recording.
Well, I mean, we could cut that part out.
All right, we'll definitely cut that out.
Definitely cut that part
What are we
out.
talking about?
This week's episode of the show is brought to you by...
Welcome to Pop Culture Catechism. Conversations about music, movies, and the longings of the human heart. Let's get started. What do you do when you doubt everything you've grown up believing and everything that you found certainty in? What do you do when you find yourself at war inside of yourself between what you want to do and with what you're actually doing? What was the last thing that you created? Was it any good? Did anyone else think it was any good? Did anyone else even notice? Did you enjoy creating it? These are all questions we're going to wrestle with. Today to the show, I'm welcoming Edmund Mitchell, which I know some of you will know, some of you may not, but he is somewhat of a godfather in the Catholic creatives movement, which is how I first got connected with Awaken Catholic and started Pop Culture Catechism. So this is our first time meeting in real life, but we've been communicating online for a few years. I feel like I know you very well because I've listened to your podcast, I've watched your shows, and I have been a fan of the many things that you have created. So today's episode is just Edmund's playlist. We're going to listen to a couple songs and talk about a couple songs that he really loves, talk about a song that I love, some songs that probably aren't that popular, but we think that you should really know, and have some great themes that we're going to talk about. If you don't know who I am, my name is Mike Tenney. I'm the host of Pop Culture Catechism. I am a Catholic speaker and worship leader out of Washington, D.C. I spent over a decade doing Catholic high school theology and Catholic education, and also trying to make it big as a rock star at night. And now I'm blessed to speak to thousands of people each year as part of this show and through various speaking gigs all over the place. This show is Pop Culture Catechism, the gospel according to pop music and movies, where we take the media that you're plugged into and talk about the gospel themes that we find in them. So then when we unplug and we put away our phones and we put away our iPads and laptops, we can actually go out in the real world and know God's love and live God's love and interact with those around us with that love in a better way. So by the end of this episode, not only will you hopefully have a better appreciation for some new music, but you'll also have some tangible ways that you can live the gospel and know God's love in your own life. I want to give a special thank you to our patrons who make this show possible and maybe popular too. Through popculturecatechism.com. I want to welcome to the show, as he has welcomed me to his studio, Edmund Mitchell.
Oh, it's so good to be here on your show in my studio.
Yeah, and it's great to finally meet you in person.
You look just as talented in person as you do online.
Thank you. You look way more denim in real life.
I did not think through the denim. For those of you listening at home, I look like Justin Timberlake in the 90s.
Yeah, but way better looking.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, no macaroni hair.
Thank you.
Yeah. So it's good. I appreciate it.
It's cool that he founded Facebook. Did you know that? He named Facebook. That's really cool.
He did. That's pretty awesome. So I know who you are. I first found out about you through my friend Josh Moldees, who runs the Holy Ruckus.
Yeah.
You were friends with at Franciscan, University of Steubenville. And at the time you were doing a bunch of creative ventures. You were doing this Catholic subscription box called LumiBox.
Yeah.
Which is no longer running.
No, that was a business thing for a while.
But you were also doing like these pocket catechisms so that people can
still do that.
You still do that. So they have like
pocket catechism.
Yep.
You saw one. I was going to let you use it, but it had a hole drilled in the middle of it.
Do they all have holes drilled through them?
They all have holes drilled in them.
That
was for a video. It's another thing.
Okay, good. So you sell pocket catechisms, and I've just been a fan of a lot of the things you do. You have a podcast / YouTube show called The Show, and this is the studio.
This is it.
And that show, there was an episode a few years ago when Kanye did his first like gospel album.
Oh yeah.
And you and Kyle like reviewed it. And I remember that was like right before my show started, and I was like, this is a really cool idea. I could do a whole show like this. So like in
I'm
some
glad
ways,
you did.
Yeah.
I'm so glad you did.
You guys were kind of a bit of one of my inspirations for starting Pop Culture Catechism was that episode. So go back
humbled.
to the show archives and listen to the Kanye episode.
Humbled.
Yeah. And there's a number of Well, and the big thing that you're doing right now, which I just think is awesome, is you're doing this Real and True project, which is basically breaking down the Catechism of the Catholic Church in video form.
Yeah.
And so tell us a little bit about that.
Emily Edmundo and I met at a Catholic Creatives Summit, and they are really, really good at content, and they work in the communications department in Detroit, and also we're really influenced by the Bible Project, which is animated explainer videos of the Bible.
Yeah, they're really good.
And then we thought, could we bring something like that to the Catholic Church? I had been falling in love with the Catechism, and we kind of all three together kind of came up with this idea of like, what if we could unlock the Catechism for the modern world through these like animated, through modern communication methods, through social media, video, YouTube videos and stuff like that. And so that started the project. It's a project, funded by Our Sunday Visitor. And so it's free to the world. It's translated to multiple languages, and it's cool. It's crazy that I get to work on that full time.
That's fantastic. Yeah. I've worked a little bit with Emily through Grotto.
Oh, awesome. Yeah. That's where I first, that was one of the first times I worked with her, like in a professional capacity.
Yeah, that's awesome.
I made
Shout out to Emily.
Yeah. And it was from this podcast. Like I like reviewed something, and she sponsored like a little segment.
That's cool.
Grotto sponsored it. Yeah.
Yeah. So so if you like Pop Culture Catechism, you'll like Real plus True, maybe even more. It's and you guys have just gotten through like the first quarter of the Catechism, right?
Yeah. The first pillar of 4, and then we're going to be starting publishing pillar 2. So
that's awesome.
I mean, I'm so glad that your podcast exists, because it's exactly in the spirit of what we believe, which is like the Catechism. There's a quote where Pope Benedict said the full reception of the Catechism in the Church is still way ahead of us. And I think it shows like yours. It's like people being inspired by it and not being like, oh, this is a textbook.
Yeah.
Like I always just refer to this when I need it. It's like be inspired from that and then make something like your show.
Yeah. And I've often thought the Catechism was something that people just needed to dive into more. It's this great teaching tool. 30 years old, just had its 30th anniversary.
Yeah.
So there's been lots of catechisms through the history of the church, but it's like,
awesome I really, I think it's like the greatest gift the church has given us in like a couple centuries. So.
Very cool. And also just one of the reasons I wanted to have you on the show is I just feel like so many people I've met through my show and just met online through Catholic Creatives have pointed to you in some way as like an influence, the kick in the butt sounding board, like Anthony D'Ambrosio, who's the founder of Catholic Creatives. We had him on our Blink-182 episode. He talked about how you were one of the first people at that first Catholic Creatives meeting. I think a lot of these people, I'm going to try to make me seem not as important. Like, I think I'm just a big cheerleader. Yeah.
Like if someone gets around me, I'm like, you should do that.
Yeah.
You should really do it. Like,
that's important.
Yeah.
Not a lot of people do it. Yeah. So I feel like Ali Hoffman, who's been on your show for a while. I've heard Connor Flanagan talk about how you were one of the first people to hire him like out of town.
Oh yeah.
Ryan O'Hara on the Better Preach podcast, he was saying you had kind of given him that encouragement.
Yeah.
I know Josh from the Holy Ruckus, you were one of his first guests. Liv Harrison, you helped her set up her studio, and we could probably go on. There's lots of people who you have been kind of that cheerleader for, or you did something that like made me think, oh, I could do a whole show about that. So I feel like in a lot of ways you are the godfather of the Catholic Creatives movement in a lot of ways.
Thanks. Yeah.
So just thanks for your yes, which has inspired and allowed so many of the rest of us to
of course,
yes.
Man. Yeah, that's humbling to hear.
Good. Well, is not everyone do I trust with like making a whole show around their playlist. So I knew when you suggested this stuff, I was like, all right, this is going to be good. Let's get into it. Okay. So tell me, these are both bands that you suggested to me.
Yes.
That I was not really familiar with. I think I'd heard of one of them, but so tell me about these bands, just a smidge.
Okay, real quick. The Collection is a group of people. I think in one of their albums, I mean, I think they have like a 25 member ensemble during some of the bands, and we were listening to some of it. There's like, I mean, trumpets and trombones and like a lot of different instruments in it, and it's one of these. This is pretty popular now. It didn't used to be as popular maybe 10 years ago, but it's like, I think you said it best, like, we're not a Christian band, we're a band that happens to be Christian kind of thing.
Christians in a band.
And so, but the other thing that caught me with this band that I really appreciate is oftentimes Christian songs don't really lean too far into the struggle of Christianity. Sometimes, I don't know, maybe there's an argument against that. And likewise, the other band, Penny and Sparrow, just a 2-man band. And they got really big just singing on YouTube, just singing some songs. And I think one of the guys, the main singer, was in Young Life. He was like a Young Life minister, I guess you'd say, for a long time. And then they started just making music. And that song as well. Like some of their lyrics and stuff. I mean, he's very well read, like really reads classics and like really loves Les Mis and Chesterton. And so anyway, so two bands that, you know, I was trying to bring something a little unique here and something a little off maybe the beaten path, but I think, yeah, there's people that know about these. Yeah. They're getting more and more popular.
No, that's good, because sometimes I think maybe I shouldn't be doing 3 and 4 episodes on Taylor Swift. Maybe I should be branching out a little bit more. So if you like Beyonce and Billie Eilish and Ed Sheeran, we got lots of episodes about them. But we're gonna do a deeper dive into some slightly lesser known bands here. These guys remind me a lot of. Do you ever listen to the Oh Hellos?
Yeah,
yeah. So they have a similar vibe. So if you like,
they have some stompy, clappy vibes to them. You know,
Like kind of that big ensemble.
Yeah,
lots of dynamics. Very, very quiet, and then very, very loud.
Acoustic.
Where'd that trumpet come from? And
exactly. So the first song.
Yeah, let's do.
Do you want to cover the doubtful one?
Yeah, the doubtful one. I like this one a lot.
So I love this one. So.
Dear brother Thomas, did you walk away from Jesus, wondering if it was all a dream? Did all your doubts creep back and tell you that your fingers hadn't ever touched a single thing? 'Cause I have read that story so many times, where you healed that man and he could see perfectly again. But in between it reads that all he saw were men as trees, and that's all that seems to cloud my vision. 'Cause all the friends I have never ever ever met you. Does that mean that they deserve to die? But I heard once that you came here as love for all of us, and not to pull the wood from out of our eyes.
So he's basically talking about, it starts with him talking to Thomas. So the doubting apostle,
Thomas. Yep.
And he said, did you walk away from Jesus wondering if it was all a dream? And I just love, from the very first line, he's talking about this idea that even in the most supernatural experience, even in the most miraculous, even witnessing Jesus directly with your own eyes, there's always room for doubt. There's always because we have free will, there's always this possibility for doubt. And it's just beautiful the way he talks about this. Did all your doubts creep back and tell you that your fingers hadn't ever touched a single thing? Because I've read so many times where you healed that man and he could see perfectly again, but in between it reads that all he saw were men as trees, and that's all that seems to cloud my vision. So he's talking about this time that Jesus heals someone, possibly not even there's a story where he's not fully healed. And so he's really wrestling with this idea. And I don't know if I should stop talking or just read through the whole thing. I don't know how you normally do this.
Let's go in a minute. I love that passage from Jesus where he I think it's Mark, where he rubs the stuff on the guy's eyes, and then he's like, what do you see? And he's like, I see people walking around like trees. And then he does it again. He's like, what do you see now? It's just it seems like a very ordinary miracle. Like you went to the optometrist and he switches out the eye lenses. What do you
better
see?
Or worse?
Better or for worse?
Better
Jesus
or
is
worse?
there with the mud on your eyes. That better or worse. So I think it's I think it lends some credibility to the gospel, because if you were making that up, you wouldn't make Jesus do a halfway miracle.
Yeah.
All right, what do you see now? Makes it very visceral. You know?
And I think the reason why the Bible, the reason why Christianity has captured the minds and hearts of so many artistic people, is that it's not always straightforward. It does have many levels of meaning. It does have this deeper meaning going on. And why would the Son of God who comes to earth to heal someone have a multi-step process? Instead of, there's other times where he just says, be healed with his words, and then they're healed. And that's something that, I can relate to. I can relate to wishing that God would just heal me instantly, or wishing that God would just free up some challenge instantly.
Oh my gosh.
And then it's why does there have to be a process here? Why does this have to be a multi-step process?
Yeah, I want it to happen now, not like the woman who's healed after 18 years. It's really, Jesus?
Yeah.
You have to wait that long? So one of the things I love about the Doubting Thomas story is, so in the Gospel of John, that's not the only focus in on Thomas that you get. In chapter 11 of the Gospel of John, Jesus has just raised Lazarus, and his disciples are like trying to convince him to go like heal Lazarus. And Jesus is like not going right away. Sorry, this is right before he heals Lazarus. And Jesus is like, all right, for your sake, so that you may believe, let's go to Lazarus. But he kind of waited too long.
Yeah.
And Thomas, the one that says, then Thomas called Didymus said to his fellow disciples, let us also go so that we may die with him.
Ooh.
And so you kind of get this early version of Thomas, who when none of the other apostles understand is like, this is going to go die. Let's go die.
Let's go do
like
it. Yeah.
I am down to ride, Jesus, whatever you say.
Yeah.
But then he has this, he's so shaken after the crucifixion that even when several of his friends are saying, we saw the Lord alive, he's like, no, I need to see it. You know?
Yeah, there's almost like a boldness to Thomas. I mean, one way to read Thomas saying, I'll believe it when I can stick my fingers in his hands is like a very dismissive, like, yeah, sure, I'll believe that when I can touch him. But another thing is like the audacity to say, I want to stick my fingers in Jesus' side. Like, you know what I mean? Like kind of the audacity, like if Jesus is alive, he can come here himself and show me, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's kind of like this boldness, like,
Which I mean,
like,
I've done.
yeah. If Jesus is going to do something, he better come here right now and show me.
Make, Jamie go to the 8th grade dance with me.
Yeah. And I think there's something beautiful about that too, where like, there's been times where in prayer or even in spiritual direction, and all I could really pray up until that point, like the only thing I could really pray, I remember telling someone who I was getting spiritual direction from, I was like, I can't pray anything much more than, Jesus, if you want to change this, you have to do something.
Yes.
Like I have no desire or will to do it. I am struggling. I'm deep in the water. Like I can't do it on my own. And I don't even know if I want to do it. So like, Jesus, if you want something to happen, like you need to do something. And I remember my spiritual director saying like, that's fine. Like that's a prayer.
Wow.
And I that comes to mind when I hear Thomas going, look, if he wants me to believe, like he's going to have to show up. I don't know what else to say right now. Like, I don't know if I can believe it. Yeah. And in some ways it's more honest, going back to the song, it's more honest than just saying having blind faith. It's more honest than going, yeah, sure. I believe it. Like I'm there, I'm in.
Yeah. And I wonder how deep that blind faith can go.
Yeah.
Like if you don't ever truly doubt. This second verse caught me where it says, my mother, she was always working in the yard, growing life from your sun and from her dirt. So I would read those words, but nothing ever seemed to grow except my lonely brother's hurt. Oh, holy preacher, did you ever think that maybe there is more to life than dying in a pew? Isn't this whole world just hell enough for all of us? Do you have to murder them for all the things they do? So there's also this doubt, not just of God, but also for organized religion. This preacher is just like telling us how terrible we are. And it's like, don't we feel terrible enough?
Yeah. And it's like how, like you can imagine a preacher standing next to Thomas and just trying to, with his words, kind of substitute his confidence for Thomas's doubt, or like his faith for Thomas's doubt, and trying to like force him. And in the same way, sometimes preachers are like, just come to church and be in this pew and let me just force you to
fix it,
as opposed to, what Jesus often does, which is just be with the sinners where they're at.
Yes.
And then you start getting the curiosity and people coming towards Jesus,
Well, before we started, we were looking up a couple places in the Catechism, and you pointed to paragraph 30, and it says, let the hearts of those who seek the Lord rejoice, because aren't we all seeking? We're all searching. Although man can forget God or reject him, he never ceases to call every man to seek him, so as to find life and happiness. But this search for God demands of man, meaning man and woman, mankind, every effort of intellect, a sound will, an upright heart, as well as the witness of others who teach him to seek God. So I think that's relevant because what you were saying is there's times when we don't feel like we have that will. We don't feel like we have the intellect of where to go. We don't feel like we have the support of other people. And it's just like, God, please help me. I often feel like I struggle with, when am I just kind of being lazy and like not working to address the issue? And when am I like doing so much that I'm like obsessing and I just need to surrender to God, And I feel like this passage here can really help unpack that, because we're searching. Okay. Although man can forget God or reject him, God never ceases to call us to find happiness. But the search we need to make effort of our intellect.
Mm-hmm.
We need a sound will and upright heart as well as the witness of others. Like we can't do it alone.
Yeah.
And so a lot of times when we find that like rock bottom moment of, God, I don't feel like I can do anything, and all those other things are failing. Like I think first of all, that cry out to God, he can kind of reach out and pull us out of the water. But a lot of times we need to kind of start in one of those areas. All right, an intellect, where do I go? I go to scripture, I go to the catechism. I need some friends. Maybe I don't have any friends. Maybe I just need to knock on a door and go talk to a priest or call up somebody or a parent or counselor.
Yeah.
So I feel like there can be error on either side of that.
Yeah, it's a balance. Like it really is it's bringing to mind this question, why does someone sin? Like, why do we sin? And there are so many different reasons for that. There could be, the culpability. There's a spectrum here of culpability. There's, I know we had also talked about a part where it talks about there's ignorance of truth that's either willful or unintentional. And then there's also, sin. There's a battle going on inside of us, the good and the bad, right? Like, and our flesh and the spirit. But then it gets really tricky when we start looking at other people. And I think in this song, this person has experienced maybe a preacher looking at him and going, I know why you're sinning. You're sinning because you just are lazy, or you just like are choosing not to do what's right. And you know clearly what's right. And he's like, no, I'm struggling with doubt.
Yeah.
Like I'm struggling to really understand, and answering that question is something that only really yourself and God can answer.
Yes.
Why am I sinning?
Why?
Is it, and I think, only your heart and God can really answer that.
Yeah. I want to come back to that question in a second, because I think that's a good jump off into our next song. But before we do, I think sometimes when people have doubts, they kind of beat themselves up about it. And I think the Catechism, if we go to 2087, this can really help a lot of people.
Yeah.
So, and I think Thomas Aquinas or Augustine, one of those famous doctor of the church people, said something like, you can have 1,000 questions and not a single doubt, or something like that. And like even the Blessed Mother, when God shows up and says, hey, you're going to have Jesus, she says, how can this be? She has this question of wonder. Like there's different ways to question. So anyway, the Catechism in 2087 and following says there's such a thing as involuntary doubt, which is just kind of like you have a hesitation or a difficulty believing or overcoming hesitations. And there's voluntary doubt, where you disregard or refuse to hold as true what God has revealed and the church proposes. There's also incredulity, which is kind of this just like skepticism or willful refusal, just kind of like, you kind of almost have like a contempt or resentment for church authority.
Yeah.
And then there's heresy, which is like the obstinate denial of faith by a baptized person who's like out there protesting for the church to like change its teachings.
Yeah.
And then there's apostasy, which is, rejecting your faith. And there's schism, which is where you start a new church. So the church lays out pretty clearly like what is a sin, and like just like having trouble believing or like having some hesitancy in your mind or like some objections come up is not it.
Yeah.
Like that's not schism. It's not heresy. It's not even voluntary doubt. It's all involuntary. And that can actually be a great foundation from where to build a solid faith.
There was a NPR, I think, podcast or something where they were talking about belief and doubt. And they interviewed a lot of different types of people, and they interviewed Billy Graham's, I think, granddaughter. And I remember in one part of the interview, the interviewer asks, do you think Billy Graham ever doubted? And without skipping a beat, she said, never. And I just thought, man, what an unfortunate portrayal of Christianity. Like, I'm not respectfully, I'm not Billy Graham's granddaughter, but like respectfully, I just don't know that Billy Graham would say, I never doubted. Yeah. And I think there's some type of fear of admitting doubt that I've encountered with some Christians, where they're afraid that if they admit that sometimes this is difficult or sometimes it's not entirely clear, that it will betray like their credibility. Yeah. But I think it's the opposite a lot of times. So too. Because if we don't acknowledge the doubt, then like this singer, you're a pastor who doesn't understand their human experience, and the fact that the Catechism, like think about it, the Catechism of the Catholic Church that's talking about what is sure and faithfully taught by the church is even addressing the topic of doubt is really cool.
It's really
it's
cool.
really, really cool. And I think it's really important that to recognize that the Catechism is constantly also trying to evangelize while catechizing.
Yeah.
And it's constantly reproposing the heart of the Christian message, which is a relationship with Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
And when you think about a relationship with a spouse, it's like, do you know beyond a shadow of a doubt that they will ever betray your trust? You don't.
You don't.
But you have faith. And to tell a child, like, no, I know 110% that my spouse will never betray me or hurt me in some way.
Yeah.
That's a weird, you wouldn't set up your child
Yeah.
for any type of relationship by saying, wait until you know beyond a shadow of a doubt that this person won't hurt you. Like you don't. You have to have
You can
faith.
pretty much guarantee they will hurt you.
Yeah.
Like
And you have to trust. You have to have you extend over that chasm of doubt a bridge of faith and trust.
Yeah, it's like you're choosing the person who will hurt you the most when you get married,
Yeah.
in some ways, and you will hurt the most,
Yeah.
and like,
Yeah.
hey, are we gonna agree to go through this even though we're gonna hurt each
Yeah.
other a lot?
Yeah.
It's crazy. I think a lot of people struggle with this because we use the word doubt to mean a few different things. And I like how the Catechism kind of just delineates, this is what we're talking about. Cause a lot of people will point to, there's a verse in the letter of James in the New Testament where he says, doubt not, for he who doubts is like a wave tossed in the ocean and a vapor in the wind. And, but I feel like a lot of people misuse that in the same way when Jesus says, don't fear, don't have any anxiety about this. People who struggle with like clinical anxiety are like, oh my gosh, I'm having anxiety. I'm having anxiety about having anxiety. And Jesus is not to have anxiety. It's like, that's not what he's talking about.
Yeah.
He's not talking about never having a hard time believing something. And he's not talking about with anxiety, like never having this like chemical reaction in your brain that causes you to react to stuff. Like he's saying like with your will and with your mind, make the choice that even though you're struggling, to choose God anyway, take that step, even if it doesn't always make sense in the moment. So
it goes back to that, which I think is a good verse to kind of counter this, the one where it talks about, it takes every effort of your intellect, your will, your heart, and the witness of other Christians to help you. So it's like, it's not that I can just go, well, I doubt and I'm not going to do anything about it. It's like those areas. What are we doing in those areas?
Exactly. Let's get into this next song.
Okay.
This is Heroes and Monsters by Penny and Sparrow.
The moon's gonna rise no matter what. The moon's gonna rise no matter what. Yeah, I can feel my armor underneath my fur, but the moon's gonna rise no matter what. The wave that parts of me, they always disagree. It's a wonder that this body doesn't break. It's a wonder that this body doesn't break.
Yeah, this is a good one. I remember one time going through a particularly rough patch, and I remember this is going to be super dramatic.
I am here for it.
I remember listening to this song on repeat, laying on the roof of a car, my car.
That's better than somebody else's car.
That's true. And staring up at the moon like a cold Toledo night, smoking like American spirits, and listening to this song in my headphones, like over and over again. It's a moody song, and it's pretty simple. There's not very much. There aren't very many lyrics or very complicated. But it says the moon's gonna rise no matter what. I can feel my armor underneath my fur, but the moon's gonna rise. There's a house on fire and I'm running in with an empty box of matches. I'm the one who burned it down. The way the parts of me, they always disagree. It's a wonder that my body doesn't break. That's basically and then there's only one other change to the verse. There's a part where it says, I'm a hero and a monster, so tie me to the chair because the moon's gonna rise. So this idea that, I think this is, I don't know how, I mean, other than scripture where St. Paul talks about the flesh and the spirit acting against each other. I mean, this is such a beautiful, like there's so many times where I feel like as a Christian, I'm going to be the hero of my discipleship or my Christianity. I'm going to like will it, you know?
Yeah.
But I'm running into a burning house with an empty box of matches because I'm the one that burned it down to begin with.
Yep.
Like, oh, I'm going to overcome these sins that I've already planted in my life to begin with. Often it feels that way.
Yeah, well, and it's because, as you said before, we often don't deal with the why.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, and I feel like the older I get, the more I believe this. Somebody told me this, and I think the older I get, the more I believe it is. Everyone who thinks they have a lust problem actually has a love problem, like actually has like an insecurity problem. Like, and that could be for any sin. Is really, okay, you're struggling with pornography. Really what you're struggling with is your ability to like feel accepted and worthy in
Yeah,
God,
communion.
You know? Communion.
Yeah.
You're seeking real intimacy. And so, yes, it is a sin. Yes, it is gravely going to hurt you and, you know, has bad impacts on other people who are exploited by the practice of it and those sorts of things. But, you know, and maybe any other people you interact with and try to be intimate with. But there's also underneath that is just this, you know, I want to be loved. I don't know how to be loved. This seems to like scratch the itch a little bit, you know, and, you know, you're drinking out of a puddle when you really want the oasis, you know, but it satisfies a little bit for the moment.
Yeah.
Even though it keeps you at the puddle because you're too scared to go out and actually find the real water at the oasis.
Yeah.
So I what I was thinking from St. Paul was, this is Romans 7:15, where he says, I hate the things that I do, but I like keep finding myself doing the things that I hate that I do. And who can't relate to that?
And then he says, oh, wretched man that I am. And this song makes you feel that, like because you could just feel like the moon's going to rise. I'm going to turn into this monster. I can feel the armor of me being the hero, but the moon's going to go up no matter, like, it's just, you feel this, this hopelessness. Right. And then what does he go on to say after that? He's like, oh, wretched man that I am. And then says something to the effect of like, but there's the grace of God, basically. Like, we you know, we read our Bible. We're reading the Catechism instead of our Bibles, but we'll find it. I know that he goes on, I don't know what he says, but he goes on to say like, oh, wretched man that I am, you know, what could become of me? And then says like, but for the grace of God.
Yes.
Like, but for the grace of God coming in. Because there really is, like, unless you go to the depths of describing the human experience of the suffering and the tearing apart where you try to do what's right and you're struggling against what's wrong. I think that's when the gospel message makes sense.
Yes.
When you can describe the hopelessness.
Yeah.
Not when you're a preacher or a friend who's just like, just do it, man.
Yeah.
Just go to church.
Yeah, Jesus, say the believer's prayer or whatever, you know, or even just go to confession.
Yeah.
You know, like, I absolutely believe no matter what, you're getting graces from confession, but like your disposition matters a lot.
Yeah.
You know, and how you go to confession matters a lot. How you receive the Eucharist matters a lot.
Yeah, and if you just look at someone and go, hey, the dude rose from the dead, the bread's his body, what's the big deal? Like, just drink the wine and shut up, get in the back of the pew. You know, like, and it's not that easy.
Okay, so this is going to seem like a left turn, but I promise it is relevant.
I love left turns.
Tell me how you feel about the first verse of Amazing Grace. Amazing Grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now I'm found. So blind, but now I see. Specifically the word wretch.
A wretch.
That God that saved a wretch like me. Amazing Grace.
I don't know. I feel like you're setting me up. Did I misquote the scripture?
No, I don't think so.
Does he say a wretched man?
He says a wretch like me. Probably depends on the translation, but Amazing Grace, he says a wretch.
I don't know. This is my first reaction. So theological accuracy warning. But I think I remember having a friend that got in a lot of trouble as a high school theology teacher.
All right.
Because he said that we are creatures until we are baptized. And all of the students were just, I guess, offended that we aren't created as sons and daughters of God. We're created as creatures. Then through baptism, we become sons and daughters. And I think your first reaction is to go, no, I'm made good. And that is true. Yeah. Like, we are created to be good, but we're kind of created to be good in this hopeless situation. Yeah. So I'm not mad at it. I'm not mad at it.
Have you ever heard the version which is the Amazing Grace, how sweet the sound that saved and set me free?
That saved and set me free.
They substitute that instead of that saved a wretch like me, because some people think we shouldn't have our congregations singing about them being wretches, because
you know what that reminds me of is there was I won't go into what group this was, but there was a group of people. Okay, I heard
It was the
heard-
Jesuits.
I don't know.
Or Opus Dei.
I
One
don't
of those. We'll piss off everyone.
It was some female religious, but there was a church that I'll tell you off air. But there was a church that the religious that were in charge or whatever, the part of the mass where you say, oh my gosh, oh man, what's the? Just say the word, and my soul shall be healed.
Yeah,
What do we say? We say,
Enter under my roof.
yeah, but how does
Not
it start?
worthy.
Oh, Lord, I'm not worthy to receive you.
Yeah.
And the sister was like, we are worthy.
Oh,
We can't say that in mass. We can't. It's like that similar.
because he's made us worthy.
Yeah,
kind of,
yeah. Like, how could we say we're not worthy? And it's a similar. I can see a similar issue here where you say, if you say I'm a wretch, I'm not a wretch.
And I think a lot of some of this is like a Catholic Protestant thing, because I think in general Luther and Calvin were much more like, no, total depravity,
I'm poop
covered in snow, you know, and God declares us innocent, but we're definitely guilty.
Yeah.
Whereas the Catholic version tends to be more, and this is more like St. Bonaventure and Duns Scotus, is more like, no, God created us good, and we are broken and need His help to kind of get back on His team. So what I would say to your friend theology teacher is, like, we are creatures because we're created by the Creator. So we are creatures. And in some sense, actually at the baptism I was at yesterday, the deacon preached on this. He says, in some ways we're children of God before we're baptized, but we're almost like children of God in rebellion.
Yeah.
You know,
yeah.
we're like children of God who have not yet accepted our sonship and our daughtership. And baptism is where we are, the family is like, we found you, you know, and we're bringing you in.
Yeah.
Or if it happens when you're older, you're like, hey, I'm coming back. It's the prodigal son.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah,
the
that was
prodigal
exactly what I
son,
was
the
gonna
prodigal
say.
son was already a son.
Yeah.
But now that he's come back, he's like, he's owned his sonship, you know?
Yeah.
And God was just waiting that whole time. And so I think sometimes the wretch part gets emphasized because we want to emphasize our need for God. But I think a lot of times what people hear is how wretched we are and how awful we are. And
Yeah.
that's like from the first song where the guy's like, come on, preacher, I already feel terrible. Why are you telling me I'm a wretch? Like,
yeah. And it's this
yeah.
Catholic both and. Like, that's what's so beautiful about, you can have these juxtapositions, these balances, these checks and balances, or not checks and balances, but these seeming conflicting ideas that find their coalescence in Jesus. There's an amazing poem that I'm just thinking of. I don't know if this is a left turn for you. There's an amazing poem that's called Jesus, the Coalescence of Contrarieties.
Ooh.
And it's like a real short poem where it talks about how, like, no one spoke so horribly of sin, but so kindly of sinners. No one, like Jesus, who was meek and humble of heart, but, like, you know, scared the tax collectors, you know, like, and like in no man do you find the coalescence of these contrarieties. I'll find it.
We're gonna put that in the show notes.
Okay,
That's
we'll
really
put it in the
good.
show
I
notes.
feel like I've heard a similar idea, maybe
Yeah.
from Chesterton or C.S. Lewis, one of those smart guys. That's really cool. So while you're looking for that, I want to talk about the moon. Because the moon features prominently in this, and the moon has, for me, for years been kind of like my God sign. Like, kind of like when I'm going through something hard, a lot of times, like, I'll just look outside and there's a full moon, or there's.
So you think the moon landing was not faked?
I do not think it was fake.
Okay.
I think the moon was put there in the sky by God specifically to give me encouragement in moments of hard times. So much so that I'm actually planning to get a tattoo of the phases of the moon.
That's cool.
Right here.
That's cool.
My sister-in-law, shout out to Marisa, is already drawn it and designed it, and I just need to find a good tattoo artist. And it's going to happen. So turning 40 next year, so that's my midlife tattoo.
Why? That's a good idea.
Yeah.
Saving that. So why? Yeah. What's with the moon? Like,
so the moon there's a few things. One is it just kept on kind of showing up in these key moments, like moments of discernment. Like when I was thinking about quitting my job of 14 years, like, the moon just kind of showed up on this night after I had decided, all right, I'm going to do it. And then I walked outside and it was the biggest full moon I'd ever seen. And just like so many moments of like that.
Yeah.
Two, I think the moon is really cool as a image of, it doesn't have its own light.
Yeah.
But it's excellent at reflecting the light of the sun. I think oftentimes that's why it's a metaphor for the Blessed Mother. You know, the Blessed Mother is unique in creation, but not because, you know, she's equal to God, but because she so well reflects God's grace on the world.
Yeah.
Also, I recently found this summer in the book of Sirach, chapter 37, I think, there's this whole like ode to creation. And one of the sections is on the moon.
So what do you get? How are you reading that in light of this song? It's like this guy's saying the moon's going to rise.
Yeah. So the moon's going to rise. Like the moon is always there. And it's even, but a lot of times you can't see it. and it looks different ways in different times. It's very,
I didn't even think about that. The moon's going to rise whether you can see it or not.
Yes. So it's unpredictable and predictable. Like it's
Okay.
it's solid and it's rock solid and faithful, and it like sways the very oceans. You know what I mean?
That's interesting.
But you can't always see it. A lot of times it's obscured because it's during the day.
Yeah.
A lot of times it's just a little sliver you can see. There's a Gerard Manley Hopkins poem where he talks about a crescent moon is like a fingernail clipping. You know, sometimes it just looks like that. And sometimes a new moon, you can't see it all, or it's on the other side of the world, but it's always there. And so it just always reminds me of God's faithfulness.
Yeah.
Even though because we live in this crazy, twisting, topsy-turvy world, we can't always see it, but it's always there shining its light on us in one way or another, you know? So,
And if you hear, I can feel my armor underneath my fur and the moon. I mean, fur and moon, I'm thinking werewolf. And I hadn't until now thought, because werewolf is when it's a full moon. But I haven't until now thought, for some reason with this song, I always thought of it being a full moon. But I didn't think of the idea that maybe he's saying like, the moon's going to rise whether it's a full moon, whether you can't see it, it's a half moon, because you don't become a monster unless it's a full moon.
yeah, that's true. I like that. I'm also very furry, so I like that.
I wish I was. The French Canadian in me.
Oh man, I would happily donate if you figured out a way to do that. So
I would love to end your episode. We don't have to end now. I'm having so much fun, but I would love to. I could read the startling coalescence of contrarieties.
let's do it, and then we're going to do one more song.
Well, no, let's do that, and we could end it on that.
All right, let's
Is
do
that
that.
okay?
That's great.
Okay,
that can be
okay.
like closing prayer.
Share your song, man.
Yeah, so this is my choice. A guy named Corey Wong, who's like one of my favorite all-time guitarists. He plays a Stratocaster just like I do, although he plays it way better. And this song he does with a guy named Robbie Wolfson, who sings it, and it's called "Light as Anything."
Wolfson. I like how you connected it to the wolf.
Yeah, the wolf,
the werewolf.
Very
theme.
good, very
Okay.
good.
This is the fire that keeps me up all night and still at church on time and somehow light as anything. This is the sun that keeps my mornings bright, that keeps my pockets tight and somehow light as anything. I'd say that life is better on my side, so come and waste your time. We could be light as anything. Look down, do you see the ground fade out?
So I wanted specifically to talk with you about this song because, so this song, it talks about, this is the chorus, it says, "This is the fire that keeps me up all night and still at church on time and feeling light as anything. This is the sun that keeps my mornings bright, that keeps my pocket tight and somehow light as anything. I'd say that life is better on my side, so come and waste some time. We could be light as anything." So what I see here is someone, first of all, there's lots of Holy Spirit images. There's like breath and light and fire. And he talks about still getting to church on time, but it just reminds me of being a young guy playing gigs in bars and clubs and that sort of thing. I'm up all night, but I'm waking up the next morning to try to get to church. But I feel like a lot of my friends didn't really understand why I was doing the things I was doing, why I was working a day job and still doing these creative things, or like why I go to Ohio or Texas to like film these shows. And, you know, like, I don't know if you ever, as a creative, ever feel like people look at you and are just like, that's how you choose to spend your time.
Oh, 110% of the time.
That's very interesting.
Yes, 1,000% of the time.
Yeah.
1,000% of the time. People are like, I mean, even today, the podcast I run is like multiple years old and it like has hardly any views, and people are like, why are you still doing this? You know, like so many things. I think also if you're entrepreneurial in any way, there are. So a while back, I started an agency called Bummer and Lazarus, and the idea was like there are bummers and there are Lazarus. Like Lazarus, the most optimistic man, the most glass is half full, glass is half full type guy, because he's been dead. So like every meal after that is a great meal. It's
great meal.
Like it's better than the meal I was gonna have, right? And then you have bummers, right? So you have people, and the world needs both. They need people that are like, but how are we gonna buy enough hats? You know, like we need people that are like, but how are we gonna get there? And if you're entrepreneurial in any sense, you're gonna have a lot of people, or at least in my experience, you have a lot of people in your life that aren't, and they're like, but like what? And so yeah, I had to learn that is not a bad thing to experience that from people around you, and to learn to trust that voice deep inside, and to go back to discernment. Like, is this a voice I can trust? Is this something I can trust? Do I know why I'm doing it? it reminds me of the story of the actor who sells everything and moves out to California to go into acting and he wants to start a career as acting, and he goes to this acting coach and says, I want to be an actor. You know, what advice do you have for me? And he says, you have no talent. You will never make it in this town. The next day, that guy shows back up because he's like, I'm going to show this guy. I do think I have it. And the acting coach says, you're going to have a long and great career in acting. Because the point is that the type of person that is dissuaded by the opinion and advice of another person is someone that won't make it.
Yeah.
But the type of person that has that deep down that can be like it's, I mean, we see this in Kobe Bryant, Michael Jordan, some of the greats where like deep down they had to go somewhere into that room where it's just them, and they had to make that decision to do it. And so, yeah, I can relate a lot to that. And it, you know, there are times in my life, I'm sure in yours, where you go into that room by yourself and you decide to do really stupid things. Like you decide you're going to be doing something, and then later people are like, that was really stupid.
Yeah. Well, and it doesn't always, sometimes you write a song and it's like the best song your band ever wrote. And other times you write a song and I bring it to practice and they're like, meh, it's okay. You know?
Exactly. And it's like, so if everyone's telling you this thing sucks and you really believe it's good, how do you know when to keep moving forward or when to be like, they're right?
Yeah.
You know, like when, and that's something that I've had to learn to cultivate and kind of, you know, I think another thing is just not being so hard on yourself.
Yeah.
And knowing that having a bigger framework under which to look at it. A good example is, I remember one time I was Lumibox was something that, you know, we did it for a year and a half, 2 years, and then we stopped doing it. And I remember someone saying, I was coming up with another business idea. And I remember someone saying, you know, like, I don't know, this business idea, you know, most business ideas fail. Like they cited some made up statistic probably. It was like 80% of all business ideas, you know, fail, or businesses fail. And I said, yeah, but the difference is you're looking at whether or not this business will fail. In my perspective, I'm the business.
Yeah.
This is just the idea today.
Yeah.
Like, I'm never going to go out of business. Like, this idea might not work and I'll pivot. So you can have a different framework where they're not a whole bunch of failures. They're a whole bunch of, you're trying.
Yeah. There's step one, step two.
It's
step
like,
three. Like how much of what you're doing now wouldn't be able to do if you hadn't done Lumibox and learned all those skills.
Yeah. I can't remember if it's Thomas Edison or the guy that invented peanut butter, but it's like, you know, Thomas Edison tried like, you know, 2,000 different ways, and they were like, well, what did you learn? He's like, I found 2,000 ways to not make a light bulb. You know, like it's like there's a shift that you can view a lot of the things you do. Like you can shift what you define as success. For me, success in that podcast is not having hundreds and millions of views, right? For me, it was showing up and doing it, honing a skill, having fun. And then also I had a small group of the right type of people that were paying attention to it and had the impact that I wanted to have, you know? So I think, yeah, I can relate a lot to that. And
I think for being a creative type, I think in some ways it's like a special kind of entrepreneurial creative type of person who just has these harebrained ideas and wants to go out and do them. But I think in another way, and I think Tolkien talked about a lot of this in his writing, is like, it's actually a call from God on every human heart to be creative, because God is the ultimate creator and each one of us is made in his image and likeness. And we don't often see a lot of the things we do as creative. But, you know, my wife is a nurse practitioner. She works in a pediatric ER. Like, she thinks of herself not as particularly creative, but she has to be super creative with, this kid came in that's not breathing and we're short a nurse and this is happening. Like, what are some creative ways I can work the waiting room and use the staff that I have? And do I need to call children's, and who do I know here that I can consult with? And what can we do right now? What can I do in the waiting room when we don't have any rooms? Like, it's super creative. And that is the image of God at work in her, you know. And some people are, you know, stay-at-home moms or stay-at-home dads, or they just work a kind of a blue-collar manual labor job where they're taking out trash, or you're a student writing papers, and there's all sorts of creativity that goes into that isn't something that's going to get 1 million views on YouTube.
And it takes a level of confidence to step out and try one of those things. And if I were to you know, and there's a balance here, we're talking about this theme about balance, but if I were to, you know, embrace in any way, shape, or form with it, while trying to not seem prideful at all, but all the people at the beginning that you mentioned that for some reason pointed to me for something, like, I just feel like I just feel like most of the time when I talk to people about their ideas, if I sense any doubt about whether or not to try it, like I just want to, I want to like try to give them that confidence of like, don't be afraid to do it. Like Ryan O'Hara or other people, like people that would call me and be like, oh man, I just want to get on social media, but I don't know. And then I give them this confidence. You know, this is the backhanded compliment I get all the time is people will call me and go, I wish I didn't care as much as you don't care about how dumb you look, basically, which is like, I wish I could just like take the big swings that you take and miss the way you miss and still go out. And I'm like, oh, thanks, you know, but it's like that. And granted, there's a balance, right? Like surely my advice is not for everyone to just look like an idiot online, but there's a certain level. I think most people, underestimate their level of tolerance for some misses or for some mistakes or honestly haven't reshifted what success means. Like if you look at one social media clip and you say, this social media clip isn't that great. Sure. But if success looks like I want to show up every day and make one piece of content, well, then you were successful and like you're going towards a different goal, you know?
Well, and I feel like this is so relevant to the life of faith because as a creative, you often feel like kind of out of step with your peers. And I feel like the life of faith requires that of us as well. Like we're supposed to be living in such a way that it also makes people stop and look and say, that's an interesting choice. Oh, like you like try to care for the poor. Okay. You spend time at church on Sunday. Oh, you vote that way. Oh, you don't use contraception, or you don't masturbate, or you're waiting till you're married to have sex, or you do charity work, or you really care about social justice and your anti-capital punishment, or whatever it is. All these things that can stand as a contradiction to our society. I feel like as Catholics and Christians, we're called to that too. And we should be the sort of people that are brave enough to look like an idiot, to be a fool for Christ, that makes people stop and say, I wonder what they have that I don't have, that I don't feel the freedom to be able to do that.
And I think the worst thing would be to live most of your life without exploring a little more the capacity for enduring those things or the hey, that wasn't so badness of life, right? Like you think walking up to someone and introducing yourself is going to be so bad, and then you do it and you're like, man, for 5 years for years I've never done this thing that I thought would be so horrible. And then you do it, right? And oftentimes I've found it's just forcing someone to do the thing they're scared of 10 times. Like if you're scared of public speaking and you think it's going to be really, really bad, I'm going to force you to do it 10 times in a row to get you like over it, And then you're going to look back and go, man, that isn't so bad. I'm really glad I did this. And I think I've just had to learn to push myself into those areas and just remember to be calm in that, and that there is something good that comes from it often.
Yeah, I totally agree. A lot of times the things that scare you are the places you need to go.
Yeah.
Devil's he's a B word like that.
Yep. So everyone go rock climbing without safety harnesses.
Start a new business.
And
make a fool of yourself.
You can fly. Get on top of your house. You can fly.
You can fly right now. And you'll be a big hit. All right. So anything else about any of these three songs that we feel like we need to
if I had to synthesize it all together, what I'm hearing as we're like synthesizing it, one, that there's this, I love that the Catechism revives a little bit this idea of the heart.
Yes.
The dwelling place, deeper than my desires, deeper than my intellect, and even in some sense my will, where, even where I don't even fully know myself, only God can know my heart. And it's that place where it says, this is the place where we choose life or death. There's like this inner room where we go, where Kobe Bryant, where Michael Jordan, where St. Francis, where all the, Mother Teresa all go, where you're by yourself and you have to make a decision. And I think I'm kind of hearing this theme throughout all this, that in that place, it is difficult. Like it's difficult and you're not always going to make the right decision, that there's a tearing of the flesh and the spirit. And that also that we should talk about this room. We should talk about this place.
Yes.
And we should look for the Christian witness. We should look for other people, but also, push ourselves out of our comfort zone with that decision.
That's the room where it happens, man.
Yeah.
That's it.
So yeah, that's what I'm hearing in all these.
I love that. So I told my listeners at the end that, I told them at the beginning that at the end we would have like kind of a gospel challenge, some tangible ways.
Gotcha.
So you kind of just gave one. So you can give another one if you want, or you can stick with that one. But just kind of one thing to take from the episode. So for me, I think I want to focus in on that, kind of what we were just talking about, is that courage to be kind of the crazy one, to the courage to be the fool, the courage to be the one that is going to create something new, that is going to step out in faith, even when things seem crazy. So that's my takeaway.
Awesome.
Be a little crazier,
awesome.
Be a little more foolish.
Mine would be, I think one way to shift your perspective a little bit, and one way to kind of go into that room and even heighten your ability to make decisions in that. It's an ancient practice. And actually the collection album that this song comes from is called Ars Moriendi, and it's on the art of dying.
Oh, wow.
And it's from a text during the Black Plague that they made and gave people on like how to die well.
Oh my gosh.
And how to talk to people that are dying.
Wow.
And like how to support those people. So, and it's an ancient practice, or it's an old practice of memento mori, remember your death.
Yeah.
St. Francis de Sales has long meditations that walk through all the steps of like, kind of imagining your death. But I think spending time, even like 5 minutes or so, if you're on an airplane going somewhere, if you're in a car, if you're somewhere where you can close your eyes and just try to imagine in as great of detail as possible your death, you dying. Wow. Like you are going to die tonight, and then whatever feelings or decisions or priorities versus non-priorities comes up, like trying to live in that space for a little bit and see how it shifts things, and then ask yourself like, why not live that way tomorrow?
Wow. That's intense. Probably not while you're driving.
Yeah, don't close your eyes and think about dying while you're driving, or you will die.
St. Ignatius Loyola has a similar thing when he's talking about discernment. He's like, imagine yourself on your deathbed, or imagine yourself standing before Christ. What decisions would you have to have made in those moments?
Yeah.
And that can often, my wife is kind of discerning some career options right now. And the other night I like pulled up my PowerPoint on St. Ignatius's like steps of discernment. And she's like, really, we're doing this? I was like, we are. And that was one of them, is like, think of the end of your life. What decision will you want to have made then when you're standing before Christ on your deathbed? So that's really good. So we're going to end in prayer. Let's do that. I think poem.
Yeah. And I also think you could clip this out even, because this is great. This will be great, but maybe do you want to open the prayer and then I'll just read it?
Let's do it.
Okay.
All right. Listeners, wherever you are, let's take a moment and let's pray in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit. Amen.
He was the meekest and lowliest of all the sons of men, yet he spoke of coming on the clouds of heaven with the glory of God. He was so austere that evil spirits and demons cried out in terror at his coming, yet he was so genial and winsome and approachable that the children loved to play with him, and the little ones nestled in his arms. His presence at the innocent gaiety of a village wedding was like the presence of sunshine. No one was half so compassionate to sinners, yet no one ever spoke such red-hot, scorching words about sin. A bruised reed he would not break. His whole life was love, yet on one occasion he demanded of the Pharisees how they ever expected to escape the damnation of hell. He was a dreamer of dreams and a seer of visions, yet for sheer stark realism, he has all of our self-styled realists soundly beaten. He was a servant of all, washing the disciples' feet, yet masterfully he strode into the temple, and the hucksters and the money changers fell over one another from the mad rush and the fire they saw blazing in his eyes. He saved others, yet at the last, himself he did not save. There is nothing in history like the union of contrasts that confronts us in the Gospels. The mystery of Jesus is the mystery of divine personality.
Lord Jesus, we thank you for your goodness. We thank you for your call that you've placed in our hearts. We ask you to help our intellect, help our will, help us find good community, a cloud of witnesses to help support us. We ask, Lord, that you give us the wisdom and the courage to know when to be a fool for you, to know when to risk it all, when to do the crazy creative thing, to help us in those moments where we struggle between our flesh and what we know we should do. Help us to find the why underneath those struggles. Help us in times of doubt to question in faith and not in obstinance, to have soft hearts, light hearts that turn to you in our times of struggle. And Lord Jesus, we ask you for the grace to live your will today. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Amen.
Edmund, thank you so much for being on my show and again welcoming me into your studio. If people want to find out more about you, where should they go?
Well, I would really love for people to go to the project I'm working on, realtrue.org. But you can also find me online at edmundmitchell.com. But yeah, I would love for people to go to realtrue.org. That's where I'm putting a lot of my energy and efforts.
That's
right
great.
now.
And especially if you are in any sort of catechesis, if you're a DRE, you're doing religious ed, you're a theology teacher, or a Catholic school teacher, like real and true. Like I wish when I was teaching, I had this as a resource. I would have used them all the time. So they're awesome. Or if you're a homeschool, mom or dad, you can definitely use them with your kids. Or even if you're just looking to dive into the Catechism or learn more about the Catholic faith, they're a great easy way to just kind of dive in. So I love what you're doing. Thanks, man. Thanks for your
Keep your podcast going. I love
Thanks.
this. This is a very enjoyable episode.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And if you want to help our show, please share it with somebody. If there's somebody who you think would enjoy this conversation, just share it with them. Take a screenshot or share it on social media. So many people have reached out to me that have said that's how they found this show, was just through a friend. And we've had an increase in growth recently the last few months. So, and that is largely due to you. So thank you guys so much. Thank you especially to many of our patrons who make this show possible, especially our patrons, Emily and Tom Cambariati, Darlene and Jay McCaffrey, Lisa and Bob Tenney, Steve and Maggie Hubbard. Thank you to all our patrons and Carl and Melissa Gore, but especially those people who are giving at a little higher tier. If you want to become a patron of the show, you can go to popculturecatechism.com. We have 6 levels of giving. You can pick one that fits your tithe or your budget, and each one of those comes with perks. You get exclusive content that goes on with each episode. So I'm not sure what we'll do for this episode, but maybe we can give them a little extra 5 minutes of something ridiculous.
Oh, yeah.
So
Stay tuned for the After Dark.
Patrons, you can find that in the Awaken
app. Is
app.
Bob Tenney related to you?
He is. He's my dad. Yeah,
that's awesome. Shout out to the Tenneys.
My parents are patrons of the show. That's great. Yeah. So you can find all of this in the Awaken app. The Awaken app just got a huge reboot. So it looks beautiful. It's got, it's a free app for everyone. It has a Christian prayer library, a music library with prayers in Latin and Spanish and English. It also is a hub for all the Awaken Catholic shows, including this one. It's a great Christian Catholic community that's kind of an alternative to some of the more toxic social media out there. And then if you're a patron of any of the shows, you get access to tons of exclusive content. I put all my talks there for my speaking ministry, and then of course exclusive content for each episode. So thank you so much to patrons and to all listeners. We love you, and we will see you next time.